Thank you very much for the invitation. Thank you very much to the organizers and the hosts for this topic. Usually I'm invited to do some very technical speeches, and now I can speak about myths as an economist, so that's really great. Thank you very much. That's why we will start a little bit mythical. If we think about transformation, this is not something that's easy for us as humans. There are a lot of books on transformation, on changing habits. That's usually very hard as an individual, but also as a society. But we can say that transformation is in navigating in wild waters, as we can see on this image. We have a few creatures that are luring behind the rocks. For example, he doesn't believe in natural laws. Then we have that one. He misunderstood Tolstoy, who said sometime peace will come. Then we have got that one, public interest. What the fuck? That's not his thing. The EU's answer to all of that is simplify. So we now reduce the environmental reporting for 95% of the market. Andre presented the optimistic version. We now take out 80% of the companies, so not a lot stays behind. So are we steering the transformation with myths or based on facts? Let's take a look at the myths. We've seen this myth yesterday, today as well. It's time. There are so many other more important issues. Let's do the transformation afterwards. The introductory speech of Mr. Holtzman yesterday said climate and natural protection are still important for citizens. Right after migration, security, economy, then there comes the protection of the environment. So first of all, it assumes that security, economy, migration has nothing to do with climate. And then secondly, it also means that it can wait. In the new German coalition contract, you can read climate goals will stay, we keep them, but the implementation will come later, will follow later. That's exactly that. You have seen this picture in another form yesterday, 3 times. That's a planetary health check of last year. First of all, that was already on my slides. I sent them in last week. But you can see here the white bubbles. That's where we stand at the moment, or where science thinks we stand at the moment. And we are almost everywhere in the red. We've passed the red threshold, but climate is not the worst. Planetary boundaries are even darker red, especially phosphorus. And then we've got introduction of novel entities, that's pollution. And then we don't even have a white bubble, that's not good news. Why do we not have a white bubble? We have no idea where we stand. There are tens of thousands of chemical substances that we introduced into the environment. Every day it's getting more and we have no idea what they do. That's why we don't have this bubble. Maybe it's dark purple or even black. This image should show us we do not only speak about climate. Yes, yesterday we talked about biodiversity. That's great. But a lot of the speeches also yesterday think transformation is climate. That's not it. We've got a lot of other problems that come up as well. And why do we why do companies need to do taxonomy and so on? Sean Kidney mentioned that yesterday. That's the reason why we need to go through this. It's not just climate, and it's not just climate extremes that we need to handle. What we do here is decisive whether we have an existence for our children, for our grandchildren, if we still have options. You'll all say now, well, yeah, that's old news. We already know that. But in political debates, I sometimes feel that we would need to repeat that again before we start negotiating. Physics cannot be deselected. Physics does not go away. Physics does not negotiate. So imagine negotiating about transgender rules, and which seems easy if you try to compare about climate change or about physics or with physics, because physics does not negotiate. So in our old parts of the brain where decisions are made, physics is not always relevant, and physics does not wait and have no compassion. So what if we say, well, in 20 years we used to have the crisis in Ukraine, we used to have the Middle East, we needed to be competitive, and then physics will just laugh at us. That's trivial. We just don't remember if we speak about priorities. Myth number 2, that's a big surprise. It's all very sudden and all at once. It's a lot, and can we just slim it down a little? I just researched a few events around sustainability in global politics to get a feeling, a sense of how long we've been discussing this topic. Limits to Growth, Club of Rome. That was not a niche report. That was big news. Then we had the oil crisis, etc. But 1972, everybody of the political decision makers knew it. It was in the press. That was the same year as Watergate. Watergate feels 100 like it's 100 years ago. It's the past. And then we've got the first IPCC first assessment report. Germany was focusing on other things on that at that point, and they were just trialing their economic model and see how it works. Then we've got the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. That was when the apartheid was abolished in South Africa. So that's also a long time ago. In Rio, that was a big deal. That was huge. And somebody would have had to say, something needs to change. It wasn't only climate, it was biodiversity. The first biodiversity COP was in 1994, that's 30 years ago. Then we've got the Paris Agreement. Merkel never said we can do it when it was about the climate, but still this agreement was a long time ago. If we take a look at this time, at these time events, it's not surprising. And then I hear, well, now let's stop with the reporting system. I'd like to use the resources that I take for the reporting to push forward the transformation. But well, you had a lot of time to push forward the transformation without a reporting and nothing happens. So first we need the reporting until you get active in the activation. That's the companies who say, we want to transform, but you had your chance. Banks also say, we never speak that loudly about it, but we still continue it in the same way. And then I sit together with big companies in Germany. I don't know how it is in Austria, but I guess it's similar. Well, the thing with these criteria, and then we start negotiating and talking and chatting, and then they say investor talks. And then they say, Well, the companies say they do a lot, and then there's not one question in the investor negotiations. And the investors don't celebrate sustainability. They ask, what does that do with your revenue? So between all the banks that say sustainability is really important, but then when they talk to the actual companies, this gets lost. I don't know where it gets lost, but somewhere it gets lost, and the revenue is more important. And then we've got my favorite myth, the environmental bureaucracy, climate environmental protection general, the excessive bureaucracy. That's why we do what Andre presented in his slides. The German government went into crisis mode 5 years ago because maybe this regulation is being implemented next year. So because of the sustainability reporting, not because of the economic developments, they're in crisis mode. All this data come from the Institute for SME Research. That's not a green NGO. That's the distribution of bureaucracy load per topic. And that's what everybody says. Climate and environmental protection, 27%. However, the number of bureaucratic requirements does not have a direct effect on the bureaucratic costs of a company. And then they see all the requirements, so all the 27% of the environmental bureaucracy requirement costs less bureaucratic costs than all the bureaucratic requirements by the Federal Ministry of Labor and Social Affairs for recording working hours. So working hours are more bureaucratic than the Federal Ministry for Environment requirements. Three machine construction companies were analyzed in more detail. So they have 1,000 employees or more, but they're not part of the taxonomy reporting because of their revenue. So those are the ones who are now accepted, who have an exception from the reporting of in terms of the taxonomy. Here you can see a cake, and this small yellow part of the cake, that's climate and environment. That was a cake. I didn't want to have that piece of the cake. I'd like to have labor protection. So here you can see down below the reporting about sustainability with 31,000 euros. Compliance is 380,000 euros, and 760,000 euros is invoices. And where does the myth come from? The CFO of this company says that the working time must be recorded daily, and it would be implemented even if it wasn't a regulation on a legal level, because the companies are intrinsically motivated to record the working hours of their employees, but they are not. That's not the case for sustainability. So imagine the leaders and managers do not trust their employees and need to check the working hours. So 40% of the bureaucracy costs are working hours, and nobody complains, nobody says anything about that. And then the huge problem is apparently environmental obligations. So here it's 5.1 for climate and environment. That is double, but even if it's 3 times, it would still be 15%, and finance would still be at 39%. So the director of finance and taxes sees the finance costs as a business as usual cost, because you need to know how much money comes in and goes out. So you need to know the bookkeeping, but you don't need to know the emissions. Well, that's the problem. It's not the bureaucracy load, it's the importance. That's the third one. There it's 0.2%. It's very similar. There's a great example. So the operating instructions have increased from 3 pages to 150 pages. That's a factor 50. So I suggest an operating instructions, a manual omnibus, because you can save a lot of operative costs there. And then we have a finance omnibus, and then maybe we have no bureaucratic costs anymore. Coming back to the myths, I'd like to leave you on a positive note. So bureaucracy is sitting somewhere completely different, not in sustainability. I'm working for the German government, so I was looking for examples that are far away. We don't need myths. We need inventiveness or innovation and courage. You know Martin Luther King? Do you know the other guy? That's Tesla. Not the other one down there on the left. It's the real Tesla. And then we need a little bit of pirate spirit. Sometimes you just need to say, I don't care, we still do it. Even if somebody wants to tell us that it's gonna cost money, it's complicated, we are going to do it.